Good afternoon. The adjustment Congress made to the defense caps for FY 18 and 19 in the Bipartisan Budget Act puts the department back on track to rebuild and restore a more agile and lethal force. The bipartisan measure will allow Congress to appropriate DoD funds at the level requested by the President for both FY 18 and 19. One of the Secretary's top priorities is reforming the department. We want to maximize the value of every tax dollar we receive. Two senior officials who are central to this effort assumed their positions this week, following Senate confirmation. Jay Gibson, DoD's first Chief Management Officer and third in command, Mike Griffin, Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. Their arrival marks the largest reorganization of the department since the 1986 Goldwater-Nichols Act, a key step in our reform efforts. On transgender, the Secretary will provide his recommendation to the President this week regarding transgender individuals and military service, and the President will announce his decision. For those of you following the Winter Olympics, we are proud of the department's athletes competing on Team USA. There are 7 athletes and 2 coaches, all U.S. Army and Army National Guard soldiers. Captain Christopher Fote, bobsled, Sergeant First Class Nathan Weber, bobsled, Sergeant Nicholas Cunningham, bobsled, Sergeant Justin Olson, bobsled, Sergeant Emily Sweeney, women's singles luge, Sergeant Taylor Morris, men's singles luge, Sergeant Matthew Mortison, men's doubles luge, Captain Michael Cohn, bobsled coach, Sergeant Shauna Robach, bobsled coach, and Sergeant Cunningham and Olson will compete this Saturday in the open 4-man bobsled competition. These athletes and coaches qualified for the Olympics under the Army's world-class athlete program. We applaud them for their courage, resolve, and fighting spirit on and off the battlefield. Their participation further proves our service members are warriors. They are also leaders and athletes. To learn more about these soldiers and other service members, visit knowyourmilitary.osd.mil and join the conversation with hashtag KnowYourMil. So with that, I'll open it up to questions. I don't have Bob or Lita. Where do I begin? Stephanie.
Hi, Dana. So my question is regarding National Security Advisor McMaster. Is the Pentagon considering options that would allow President Trump to move General McMaster out of his National Security Advisor role and back into the military?
General McMaster works for President Trump. Any decision with regards to staff, the White House will make those determinations.
I've got a serious question for you. There was a Bloomberg report yesterday that saying that the administration was considering saying that the strike on Russian mercenaries in Syria was intentional. Quote, evidence of the president's tough stance, perhaps. Can you rule that out? Was that intentional?
The strikes in Syria, our strikes, were done out of self-defense. We were very clear about that. We saw that group moving towards us. We still don't know, and I won't speculate about the intentions or the composition of that group. What I can tell you is that we used our deconfliction phone line, and we used it before, during, and after the strike, and we were assured by the Russians that there were no Russians involved. And so those are all the details that I have.
So it was purely self-defense. The U.S.-backed forces were defending themselves.
That was purely out of self-defense. Joe in the back.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask you about the ISIS foreign fighters who are being detained by the SDF in Syria. If you could give us an update on their status, how many they are, and what the DoD is planning to do to hand them over to their countries if they are innocent?
Well, the issue of foreign fighters held by the SDF is challenging. But it's not just a DOD or even just a U.S. government decision. It's something that we have to work with the coalition as well as with other nations to deal with and to take responsibility for these individuals. This will be a whole of government approach, not only for us in terms of justice, but other countries will also have to engage other elements of their government. So it's long-term, but it's something that we are actively addressing. The Secretary addressed it at NATO last week, and we will continue to look for solutions in a holistic way.
Follow that for a second.
Sure, Joe. No, go ahead, Joe.
While you look for solutions, does the Pentagon consider to move some of them to Guantanamo if there are arguments that they have conducted attacks against U.S. interests in the region or elsewhere?
Currently, there are no plans to move anyone to Guantanamo.
Dana, to follow that quickly, in his first part of that question, he used the term send innocent people back to their countries. As I understood what Secretary Mattis said on his trip he was talking about all nationals going back to countries of origin. Could you clarify that for me, please?
So he did. He talked about, this is about countries taking responsibilities for their nationals who are currently held by the SDF.
Whether they're innocent or not, that remains to be seen.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Tara.
Thank you, Dana. Back to McMaster. Would the Pentagon welcome General McMaster returning here in any sort of capacity, whether it's with one of the services or in a joint role?
General McMaster is serving the President of the United States, and he has a very distinguished career. Any decisions that will be made with respect to any changes or decisions will be the White House.
And then one quick. Yeah, this has been a heartbreaking week out of Lakeland, Florida, and there was a pretty wide-ranging conversation yesterday, both at the White House and then at town hall with the students. I was wondering if the White House has reached out to DOD for any sort of options, maybe having the National Guard be used as a way to help secure schools.
I'm not aware of any taskers that have been sent to us.
Just to follow up on that, Jane. Does Secretary Mattis believe the AR-15 should be allowed to be purchased by civilians?
I have not asked him that question.
Does he have any thoughts about what happened in terms of gun control in this nation?
Our task and the Secretary's focus is 3 parts. It's lethality, to ensure that we're the most lethal force in the world. It's building our partnerships and alliances. And it's reforming this department. And so he's very happy that we have 2 new senior executives that are going to help us do that. That's his focus. Carla. Carla.
On transgender, I know you said that the president's going to be providing his recommendations to the president this week, but we're already halfway through Thursday. Tomorrow is it. Can you give us some more insight on when this recommendation is going to fall into the hands of the White House? And can you tell us why the delay? There was a self-imposed DOD deadline that he was going to send his recommendations yesterday. So why the delay?
This is a complex issue. And the Secretary is taking his time to consider the information he's been given. It's an important issue, and again, he sees all of his decisions through the lens of lethality. And as you said, it was a self-imposed deadline, but I'm confident that the President will give him the time necessary to provide him with a thoughtful recommendation.
Did he ask the President for an extension?
There was no extension. Again, we're anticipating that this will hit the White House this week.
And is the Secretary reviewing what the panel recommended to him, the guidance and the recommendations? Is he going to alter that?
The panel's recommendations were just that. They were recommendations to the Secretary. The Secretary considered those recommendations and his own thoughts, and he had his own conversations. And now he's prepared to provide his recommendation that's been informed by that conversation and those conversations to the White House.
So he could reject what the panel recommended?
The Secretary could decide to do whatever he likes with respect to his recommendation. The guidance was his recommendation to the President. The panel provided him advice and guidance. Sylvie.
Thank you, Dana. Hundreds of pro-regime forces came to the rescue of the YPGs in Afrin these last days, and they were apparently welcomed by the YPGs. Does it make U.S. an ally of the pro-regime force now?
I'm not aware of those reports, so let me come back to you about that, Sylvie. Barbara.
Can I come back to two things that were different subjects that were just brought up? And the first one is on the gun issue. And quite seriously, given the fact that 3 of the young victims in Florida were members of the junior ROTC, given the fact that young people in America, of course, are the prime group in America that would be recruited into the U.S. military. You're not the first. The Pentagon has always stayed out of the civilian gun debate, but given the emotion in the country, the president's involvement in it, the fact that 3 junior ROTC young people were victims, can the Pentagon, and it does involve recruiting young people into the military, can the Pentagon really continue to stay out of the gun debate in this country, realistically?
Our mission is to defend this nation and all American citizens. I think that we have to remember that the tragic events in Florida and gun control, those are issues for political leaders. Those are issues for local governments. Those are issues for our Congress and for our president. And it's really their responsibility to determine how we move forward with respect to all of those issues.
But again, and I do want to come back to the foreign fighter thing in 1 second. Again, there is a sense that this is a subject right now that has grabbed the national conversation. I'm not sure anybody would dispute that. And young people who might want to be recruited, might want to consider the military, certainly are watching this. We have seen junior ROTC people in this situation. No one is suggesting that the Pentagon would have the solutions, but do you stay out of the national conversation given the fact that the U.S. military most certainly involves the young people of this country?
We're proud. We are very proud of the young people of this country, and we're very proud of those who are competing for us on Team USA. We have to defend the country. Our mission is that. Secretary has 3 priorities. I think the conversation happens around our dinner tables. It happens among our civic leaders, but it is a political issue, and that's something that our political leaders have to be responsible for and ensure that we do have that conversation. Elizabeth.
Just to follow up on this, the president directly tweeted this morning the idea, though, that teachers who have former military experience could have guns in the classroom. So the military could have a very central role in this if we're looking at former service members or reserve members, as other people have brought up. So are those conversations going to happen? Do you plan to have a dialogue between the White House and the Pentagon about how service members and the military could play a role in gun control?
Currently, we haven't been given any tasker with respect to that, but we are always having a conversation. We are always open to any conversation that the White House wants to have with us. We serve at the pleasure, the politicals, we serve at the pleasure of the president. So we are absolutely open to those conversations. But again, issues of gun law are issues for the Congress and for the president. And it's a conversation that needs to happen, but it's a political decision. Missy.
Hi, Dan, thanks. I have a couple of detainee-related questions. Part of the executive order that was issued on January 30th regarding detainees tasked Secretary Mattis to come up with recommendations within 90 days regarding the disposition of suspected militants caught on the battlefield, including Guantanamo. The possibility of putting them in Guantanamo. Can you just tell me where does that stand? Is that something that Secretary Mattis is considering, or are there internal recommendations that are still working their way up the bureaucracy to get on his desk? And secondly, there was a deadline or a milestone this week reached with the case of Ahmed al-Darbi, who's a Saudi detainee at Guantanamo, and under his plea deal, he can be repatriated this week to Saudi Arabia. According to the DOD, the military is ready to send him back to Saudi Arabia as soon as there are security guarantees from the Saudi government. Does his repatriation it all conflict with the apparent position of the president, which is not to have prisoners leave Guantanamo Bay. This would be the first transfer since his presidency began. And thirdly, sorry, can you just give us a status update on the American that's being detained in Iraq? What's going on with him, detained by the military in Iraq?
Okay. Regarding detainee policy, we are still staffing that. There hasn't been a consolidated recommendation put in front of the Secretary yet, so that's still working. With respect to Al Darby, we anticipate the transfer soon, but it is important to understand that the February 20th was the beginning per his plea agreement, that it was after 4 years he had served. This decision is not a unilateral decision. This is a State Department has a piece of this, and we're working with our Saudi counterparts. So while we are working it, it's still something that's in discussions, and we hope to resolve it relatively soon.
And the last, the American.
Thank you. Regarding the American, we are still working with our colleagues at the Justice Department. This individual has had access to an attorney, but it is still being, it's still in discussions when we're working with Justice to resolve it. Jenny.
Thank you, Dana. On the resumption of the United States and South Korea joint defensive military exercises, did you make any decisions of time frame or when will we starting that?
We deconflicted the exercises with the Olympics and the Paralympics. Any decision that we make will be an alliance decision. And so when we're ready to make that decision jointly, we'll have more details for you. Right now, we don't have any details to share.
You don't change any schedule or note the suspensions of
No, we will have more details once the Olympics are over, and then it'll be an alliance decision about how and when we move forward. Kasem.
One of my questions actually was covered by Sylvie, so I would appreciate if you include me to the response.
Absolutely.
To that. And the other question was the man-beach mechanism that discussed between Secretary Mattis and Minister Janikli in Europe, in Brussels. Can you update us what's going on with this mechanism, or has the work began regarding the mechanisms that the United States and Turkey are planning to deal with the presence of YPG in the man-beach city?
Well, I can tell you that the Secretary's meeting was very positive. And it was a very open discussion. Obviously, we want Turkey to focus on the common threat, and that's defeating ISIS. But we recognize that Turkey has legitimate concerns, and we're helping them to address it. So we will continue to have that dialogue, but it is important that all parties, this is a very complicated battle space, and it's important that all parties understand that the common threat is ISIS, and that fight is not over. Jeff.
Thank you. Photos have emerged that purportedly show a Russian fifth-generation fighter over Syria. Does the Defense Department believe this is an escalation on the Russians' part?
Jeff, let me take that. I've seen some initial reports, but I'd like to get back to you about more details regarding it.
And on a separate matter, you've mentioned Secretary Mattis sees issues through the lens of lethality. Does the Secretary believe that in order to make the military more lethal force, it's time to replace the M4 and the M16?
The Secretary considers all of his decisions through that lens of lethality. I have not asked him about that specific question, but I'll be happy to come back to you.
Thank you so much.
Wes.
Thanks. There was a report this week that the investigation into the Green Beret who was killed in Mali last summer has prompted a broader investigation into misuse of funds, alleged misuse of funds by members of SEAL Team 6. Can you tell us whether that's accurate, whether there is such a second, wider investigation?
I can't confirm that there's a second, wider investigation. I know there is an ongoing investigation, and I'll be happy, and when we have more details, I'll be happy to share those.
Thank you very much, Madam. Two questions, please. This week, Pakistan have voted against U.S. resolution as far as Afghanistan and terrorism is concerned, and State Department acted yesterday. My question is, does Secretary still have faith and trust in Pakistan that they are doing what they're supposed to do to help the U.S. and the allies in the region to bring peace and stability in Afghanistan? And finally, because there was a meeting between the generals from the US and Pakistan on this issue that Pakistan will do more.
The Secretary believes that Pakistan has an opportunity to do more with respect to the regional security, and that it's in its interest to do more with respect to regional security. It's an opportunity, and we would welcome Pakistan's involvement. Give me your second question again.
Two generals, US and Pakistani generals, met on this issue, despite what President said or want Pakistan to do more, but still there was a meeting between two generals that there might be a resolution between the two countries on the peace and stability in Afghanistan.
Well, with respect to the South, we have the South Asia strategy, and the South Asia strategy is a regional approach, and therefore it requires that we have a conversation within the region. And so we are ready to continue those conversations, and we will keep having those conversations because it's in everyone's interest to defeat terrorism.
And second, my question, I'm sorry, as far as U.S.-India military-to-military relations are concerned today, where do we stand now? Are there any back and forth, any high-level visits are going on, or when the Secretary will welcome here the new Defense Minister of India?
I'm not aware of a scheduled visit. I will tell you he enjoyed meeting the minister while he was in India. But India has been very supportive, and they've pledged additional developmental aid in Afghanistan. They've been willing to help with aviation maintenance. All of that is very helpful in ensuring, again, that this regional approach works, and India is an important part of that.
Thank you.
Right here.
Thank you. Can I follow up the question about Afrin? You say that you are not aware of what is happening in Afrin now, but I want to ask you...
Well, I didn't say I didn't know what was happening in Afrin with respect to this particular incident. Yes.
The particular question. Actually, did you see the footage from Monday that the YPG or SDF is welcoming the pro-Assad fighters and the Iran-backed militias? These are both the enemies of the United States. United States wants to break the Iranian influence in the region and wants to throw out of the Syrian future Assad. But in that situation, the U.S. allies on the ground allied themselves with the enemies of the United States. So what does Pentagon think on this?
As we've said, this is a complex battle space, and it's why we've said that we need all parties to address the common threat, which is ISIS. The fight is not over. Anything that is not directed towards the fight against ISIS is a distraction. And we encourage all parties to focus on that because there's still work to be done. TM.
Going back to the question about the attacks, the self-defense attacks, I think on the February 7th and 8th. Yeah, again, we go back to these media reports of U.S. forces bombing Russian mercenaries. This isn't the first time that U.S. forces have conducted self-defense attacks. I believe in southern Syria there was multiple bombings against Iranian-backed militias, something that the U.S. coalition could verify within days. It's coming on 2 weeks on this attack, and you continue to say that you don't know who struck with a number of aircraft. So I'm wondering, is there an intelligence failure here? Are you not trying to find out that you killed around 200 Russian mercenaries? It seems to be taking a while.
It's just a matter of the fact that it's a complex battle space. What we did was out of self-defense, regardless of the composition, and I won't speculate about the full composition of those forces.
Ma'am, we have time for a few more questions. Could we just get quick clarity on Harvey? You said that the Pentagon intends to release him both soon and relatively soon. I just want to make sure that it is the Pentagon's intent to release him, and could you clarify what you mean by soon and relatively soon?
I can't qualify soon or relatively soon. There are other factors, there are other parties, there are other agencies involved in this conversation. But it is our hope that this will move forward soon.
Does that mean that he's been cleared for release by the Pentagon and you're waiting for state and other agencies?
Again, this is not a unilateral DoD position. There's a holistic approach. It'll be a U.S. government, and then we're also working with partners. So it is our intent to try to move this forward. But again, we have to work with our interagency partners. Missy. one second, Missy.
So should we expect that you all will not reach clarity about who was among the dead in the February 7th attack? I mean, or is intelligence analysis still being conducted?
We're always conducting analysis and things change, and again, this is a complex battle space. I just won't speculate now about what the composition or the motivation of that particular force was.
Can you let us know? It's a request. Can you let us know when you all reach certainty or relative certainty about what?
If we have more details that we can release, I will certainly provide those details. Joe.
Yeah. Have you seen any evidence that the Syrian regime is using or has used chemical weapons in the attacks against the eastern Ghouta in Damascus, in the suburb of Damascus?
We have seen the reports from various people on the ground, to include NGOs. We haven't concluded or seen the evidence of that ourselves. However, we are looking for it. Right here.
Regarding the attacks in eastern Ghouta, have there been any communication with Russia about the bombings that have been taking place and maybe a possible ceasefire?
Our conversations with the Russians with respect to Syria happen primarily on the deconfliction line. So we use that line frequently. It's never gone down, and it's worked. And so we continue to have those conversations. What's important to know is that our focus is de-ISIS. It's to defeat ISIS. We want to ensure that that is where all parties are focused. And so insofar as we talk to the Russians, it's to ensure that that is our priority. I'll take one more. Over here.
Thank you, Dana. Going back to the transgender issue, the other day it was published that when President Trump first announced that he was considering vetoing transgender people in the army, General Danforth was not consulted at all. I wanted to confirm if that's true, and also if in this case, apart from Secretary Mattis, any other people in the army has been consulted to find out their opinion on the issue.
The president is the commander-in-chief, and he makes decisions about how things move forward. The president speaks often and frequently to the secretary and to members of military leadership. Where we are now is that the secretary, he asked the secretary for his recommendation, and the secretary has taken his time to consider all aspects through that lens that he sees all decisions of lethality, and he will make his recommendation this week.
And about Danforth, can you confirm if he was not consulted?
Again, the president consults with his military leaders often. Thank you all.